Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video I want to talk about the conclusion we just played yesterday of that one store campaign that I'd mentioned before. I was playing a Gloomstalker Ranger in it. All the characters were level 5, and basically it was a group in Chinatown who were running a bunch of D&D games, basically trying to help revitalize Chinatown, which in our city was hit pretty badly by COVID and all of its after effects. And it's been a really fun series. The adventures have all had a very Chinese flavor to them as well, which makes sense since all the people running it are Chinese, And they've just been a lot of fun. So this was finally the 4th out of 4 parts. And I once again played my Ranger. Most of the people in our group played the same characters throughout. We did have a couple people who switched up here and there, which, they didn't care. The store was totally fine with it. So basically they had a bunch of different tables and different DMs that would run each different game. But for the final boss fight, we were kind of all fighting the boss at the same time, but each at our own tables. And the idea is that it's different groups of heroes in different parts of the multiverse, basically all trying to, DPS the boss, who's some sort of celestial being and exists in all these planes at once. And so each table's doing their own thing, but it's like our combined damage to try to defeat the boss, right? Which is just kind of a cool and interesting idea when you're running 6 or 7 tables all playing the same adventure. So anyway, our party, once again, we had our Goliath Rune Knight, we had a Psy Warrior, we had a Drunken Master Monk, we had our Sorcerer, I think he was an Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, mostly he was just transmuting spells. We had my character, the Gloomstalker Ranger, and then we had Paul's character, who last time he played a Forged Domain Cleric, and this time he decided to play a Dragonborn Paladin, Oath of Vengeance Paladin. So we kind of lost most of our source of healing since we didn't have a cleric this time. But, we had a Paladin. He's got lay hands. It'll be fine, guys. It'll be fine, In any event, it ended up being a lot of fun, as always. Basically, the adventure consists of, us having to go around to different locations, trying to gather different clues. Usually the end bosses in each stage of the campaign, they've all had different immunities, vulnerabilities, and resistances and stuff, right? So you'd have to try to defeat different enemies or solve different puzzles to figure out what some of these immunities or weaknesses might be. In this case, the boss turned to be vulnerable to poison, so that was nice. And so you'd have to try to get this kind of information as well as, try to figure out what was going on, get gold and stuff. And they had a shop where you could buy stuff and re-equip your characters and things. And basically, you just go around from location to location. We also interact with some of the NPCs we'd met in previous installments of this series, which was kind of fun. And then, of course, everything comes down to the big boss fight. And so basically they take a break halfway through. And then the second half, you could you've got a bit of time to try to wrap up whatever you were doing, and then, giant boss fight with all the different tables, basically, right? And so each DM would calculate how much damage was being done by their group, and then the guys running the event, they would be adding it all together and combining everything, right? So our particular table, we've kind of gotten a bit of a reputation now as a bunch of power gamers because in one of the previous installments, we did something like 40% of the total damage to the boss out of 6 or 7 tables of people. So ever since then, they literally told us the other day that they have to retune encounters because they know we're going to be there. And they're yeah, but what about power gamer table? Oh yeah, that's right. Better bump the boss's hit points up more. So I personally take that as a compliment. But I do want to point out, our group isn't all about damage. We usually have a pretty well-rounded group. Mike's Rune Knight has really been one of the stellar keys to a lot of what we do. And he hasn't really concentrated on damage at all. Not that he can't do damage. I mean, he's a fighter. He's got action surge, whatever, right? But mostly he's a Goliath. He just tries to grow big and then grapple the enemy. And then once they're restrained, we just kind of beat them down into the ground. So I mentioned in the last game that we cast Fly on him because the enemy was this big, giant, phoenix type of bird. It wasn't really on fire or made on fire, though, but it was a big, fiery bird type thing. But it's an actual physical bird inside the fire, right? It's not composed of fire. That's what I'm trying to say. in the worst way possible. So anyway, we catch flying him. He goes up, grapples with the bird. He had resistance to fire damage, I think from one of his runes or something. So he's just taking damage, but it's not a lot of damage, right? And he manages to grapple this thing, pull it down to the ground, and it could not escape. And like one of the things about ability checks is that it had legendary saves, but these aren't saving throws. So it couldn't use those to escape from him. It actually was stronger than him, and it had advantage on like strength checks. It still couldn't escape. Like Mike was just rolling, like, I mean, he also has advantage because, you know, he's huge and everything else. And I think that's one of the advantages of the growth ruin thing that he was using, right? So he just kept boss rolling it up, and you know, he had advantage, the boss had advantage, and it just couldn't get away, and we were just able to kill the thing. Whereas it was really looking like me and the sorcerer were probably the only guys who were going to be able to hurt this thing because I was using range attacks, right? But no, Mike pulls it to the ground, we beat it down, kill it, no problem. So in this one, this boss was not flying, but he was ridiculously mobile, and he basically had like this ability called like evasive footwork or something, and he didn't even have to activate it. It was just this permanent ability where he could always move away from people without provoking opportunity attacks, right? And then he had crazy movement speed as well. And he had like, you know, legendary actions and even a legendary reaction where you could like attack and move on the same reaction. And so he was just darting all over the battlefield. So Mike's kind of being bogged down in other stuff. He's got other things on him. But we're trying to like clear a way to get him to the boss. And sure enough, Mike ends up grappling the boss. He also has advantage on strength checks, but he was weaker than Mike. I think he had a 16 strength and Mike had an 18. So once again, Mike just grabs the guy, immobilizes him basically, or restrains him, and then the beatdown was on. So I mentioned the vulnerability to poison because one of the things we found was like there were different types of elemental imbuements that you could put on weapons or armor, but the weapons and armor had to be non-magical. But fortunately, my hand crossbow was non-magical. Oh, I should mention as well, in the last video I talked about how I'd played the hand crossbow version of this character previously. Basically, I just went variant human, so I took sharpshooter and crossbow expert as my 2 feats since we're level 5, right? And then last time I decided to try going custom lineage and taking impaler plus sharpshooter and using a longbow instead. And I just kind of wanted to compare them and see how they were, but I already did a video on this. My conclusion at the end was that the hand crossbow version was better, which is what I expected. I even talked about in that video going in, I expected, you know, and I even made a video about that, or I expected the hand crossbow version to perform better because that extra bonus action attack combined with the damage from sharpshooter is just, it's so big. I was like, but, you know, you do have an extra +1 to hidden damage because you're going to have 18 dexterity with the custom lineage setup compared to only 16 with the variant human. So you're going to be hitting a little bit more. You are using a D8 for your damage instead of a D6 for the longbow. You know, there are some other advantages. I was like, you know, instead of using favored foe, you could use Hunter's Mark because now your bonus action isn't being, you know, claimed, and that's a little bit more damage as well. But there was one thing I'd overlooked, and that was the other power of crossbow expert feat. It wasn't the bonus action attack so much. I mean, it was. That's obviously big as well. But last time, the boss we fought had a lair action, and they couldn't use the same lair action in back-to-back rounds. They had to change it up from like 2 or 3 different options, right? But one of them was they could summon these 2 giant eagles, and the eagles would try to engage people using ranged attacks. And so every time I wanted to attack the boss, I had this freaking eagle in my face, and I can't afford to shoot with disadvantage. I'm already using sharpshooter. It's hard enough to hit as it is. So I'd have to eat opportunity attacks by moving away from these eagles. And every time, they're just beating me down lower and lower. And the boss has, you know, like some AoE attacks and other things like that that is hitting us with as well. So it was just not a good situation. And I was like, man, who would have thought that? I mean, obviously, we all know that's a great ability as well. But mostly, let's be honest, I took crossbow expert for that bonus action attack. That's what I was mostly thinking. And it ended up being the other part of crossbow expert that was actually the most impactful in that game. So for this one, I was like, okay, this was the guy I originally played anyway. It was the hand crossbow version. I'm going to play that for this game as well, right? And I mean, basically my character misses on half his attacks. But I make up for it in volume because, I have my 2 attacks around because we're level 5. Since I'm a Gloomstalker, I also get that extra attack in the opening round of combat with the extra d8 damage on top of that. And then I have my bonus action attack. So usually I'm attacking 3 times a round or 4 times in the first round. And even if I'm only hitting half the time, it ends up being a ton of damage. Because, by the time you add my +3 dex bonus, my 10 damage from sharpshooter, you're already looking at a +13. So if you hit twice out of 4 attacks, let's say we even miss with the Dread Ambusher attack, right? You're still looking at like 26 damage plus your weapon damage. So that's probably another 7 on average. You're doing like 30 plus damage per round. So the fight starts. I miss on my 2 of my attacks, including the Dread Ambusher attack, of course, but we're fighting the previous round before this. I miss on all 3 attacks. But then, in what ended up being the final round of combat, I rolled 2 20s, 2 natural 20s, and like 17 or 16 or 14, whatever it was. It was enough that I could hit the boss with my +3 bonus to attack, right? Because I got my +3 proficiency, +3 from my dexterity, +2 from archery, which is +8, but then -5 from sharpshooter. So we're sitting at a +3 bonus, right? So I end up hitting them all 3 attacks, and 2 of them are crits. I have favorite foe going on this guy. I've got this poison imbuement thing that we could get for this campaign on my weapon because we know that he is vulnerable to poison damage. So, that's all getting doubled. And, we're already looking at a bunch of dice for that. 5d6 from the crits, and then they just doubled it for the vulnerability. And like I said, the favorite foe damage, that's another 5d4 worth of damage. We've got all the weapon damage. We've got just 39 points in static damage just from 3 instances of sharpshooter and 3 instances of dexterity bonuses, right? Then all the weapon damage was like, another 5d6 because 2 of them are crits, right? And altogether, I ended up doing 109 damage to the boss in 1 round of combat on a level 5 character. And I didn't have Dread Ambusher because I'd already used it in the first round. This is like the 3rd round of combat by now, right? Also, our Paladin. So the boss, he had like these 2 celestial dragon things that were fighting with him. And they're immune to radiant damage because they're like celestial beings. But they're vulnerable to necrotic damage, we found out from all of our puzzles and clues. So the sorcerer is mostly working on those using transmute meta magic. And then for like every turn, it's like I cast this, transmute it to necrotic damage. And then I use my bonus action to convert all my sorcery points back to create that spell slot. And the next round, it's like, well, I'm out of sorcery points, so let's start converting all these first level spells into sorcery points to convert them into more spell slots for, things like his necrotic fireballs and stuff like that, right? Necroball, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But he ended up doing a ton of damage to those things. Well, most of us were just trying to focus down the actual boss. And fortunately, the boss was not immune to radiant damage because our Paladin ended up landing a crit smite on him with, he only had, 1 second level spell slot left. But he ended up just, like, he's using a great sword. And I think he had like a lightning imbuement or something like that on the damage, right? Which the boss is not vulnerable to, but it's still more damage, right? The one attack for the greatsword, like, because he rolls the damage and he rolls like 11 out of 12, right, on 2d6. And then it's like, okay, but you crit, so now like roll again. And he rolls 10 the next time, another 6 and a 4. So we're just like, holy cow, look, that was 21 damage just from the weapon damage. And then he's got his dexterity bonuses. And it's like, and then you got the lightning damage, which is doubled. That was like another 7 or 8 damage, right? And then the smite, and he just rolls, like, I think every dice was a 4+. He had a couple 4s in there. Might have had a 2, but he had a bunch of 7s and 8s. He ended up doing like 74 damage in 1 hit. And then he rolled a natural 1 on the other attack, of course, right? 20 on 1 dice, 1 on the other dice. Go figure. But yeah, he ended up doing like 74 damage in 1 hit. Like I said, we got the Psy Warrior who's in there. He's doing some decent damage. He's got Action Surge. The Rune Knight did some damage early on and then decided to restrain the guy. And, he also had this way of summoning all these shadow clones. And they did a lot of damage, but they only had like something like 5 or 6 hit points, right? So our monks just like running around the battlefield, taking out all these shadow clones so that their damage doesn't just like overwhelm us, right? And it ended up being just a really fun fight. And once again, our group did something like 1,100 damage or something total in the fight. And that was only over 3 rounds of combat. It was absolutely ridiculous. We did have some pretty fluky rolls, like I said, right? Like, even when I had the 2 crits in the 1 round, my weapon dice rolls were ridiculous. They were all like 4s, 5s, and 6s pretty much on my D6s. The D4s were not very good for the favorite foe. I think I had like 1 4, a bunch of 2s, and a 1 or something like that. But whatever, that's the most minor part. Point is, our group did a ton of damage. Nobody went down. Oh, that was the other thing too. The Psy Warrior had a lot of damage mitigation, and the Rune Knight actually took the protection fighting style. So he was actually like doing a lot to mitigate damage as well. And I think I took the most damage in the party. I actually would have gone down, but except for protection, he managed to turn what would have been a crit into a miss by giving them disadvantage. And I was already like down well below half at the end of the fight. And that damage would have put me down for sure. It was like over 20 damage, and I only had like 12 hit points left or whatever, right? And then we didn't have healing words. So, now the Paladin's going to have to probably use their action to heal me with lay hands, and then he's not doing damage, and I'm not doing anything. It could have gotten ugly, but damage mitigation ended up coming through. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of healing, but we did have a lot of damage. And sometimes the best defense is a good offense, Anyways, it ended up being a lot of fun. So Kevin and the gang, if you guys ever watch this video, I don't think I even told them that I have a YouTube channel. I really should have. I need to plug myself a little more, But whatever. But yeah, if you guys ever find this video and watch it, I just want to thank you guys. You guys ran a great, not just this event, but the entire series has been great. We absolutely loved it. I'm sorry if we made things difficult for you, and if sometimes our damage was a little absurd. I get it. We were definitely a very DPS heavy group, especially in this configuration. The one with the cleric, we were a little more well-rounded and balanced. Oh yeah, the Paladin did cast Bless on me, the Rune Knight, and the Psy Warrior, though. Not on himself, which is very generous of him. Very Paladin-like, honestly. Not thinking of other people first. But yeah, that also ended up being a huge boost, because when you're suffering that -5 to hit penalty, every single point that you can get to your attack roll to help boost it up and compensate for that really, really helps a lot. So I have no idea how much Bless damage actually contributed. I would not be surprised, though, if Bless actually did more damage than his crit smite when you add up like all the misses that got turned into hits because of Bless, Bless is just such a great spell for a first level spell. It's so good. It was also funny because our DM didn't even remember that we had Bless on him. But like at one point, the Paladin gets hit twice in the same round. And he had a really good armor class. So he wasn't getting hit a lot, but he get hit back to back in the same round. And he's like, crap, I got to make 2 concentration saving throws. And the DM's like, what are you concentrating on? He's like, Bless on those guys. And he's like, oh, I was wondering why they were all rolling D4s. We're like, yeah. But yeah. Anyway, it was a great event. It was a lot of fun. The entire series is fun. They said they're actually thinking of making like their own campaign world and just expanding what they've already done for this series into a world, which I hope they do, because that'd be a lot of fun to play in. And I haven't really done a lot of gaming at like local gaming stores. I've always had enough people in my life that just want a game that would just go to somebody's house and game, I'm not saying I've never done it. I'm just saying I haven't done it a lot, maybe 10 or so times in my entire life. And I've been playing D&D for over 40 years. So that's really not a lot when you think about it like that, right? But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and hopefully they keep the series up. I probably wouldn't look to play the Ranger throughout. The Ranger was a lot of fun, but sometimes it's nice to play other stuff too. It's not always about the damage, although it definitely was with this character. Oh, I should probably say too before I wrap things up, it's interesting to me how what level the characters are at really makes a big difference in what you decide to play. Like, one of the reasons I went Ranger was specifically because we were level 5. And I was like, well, I get extra attack at level 5. I've got 2nd level spells at level 5, and things like Pass Without Trace could be pretty handy. I also used Summon Beast that fight, but then I lost it like a minute into the fight. Because I think in the 2nd round or 1st round, I got hit and lost concentration, or maybe my beast got killed. Yeah, I think that's what happened. The beast actually got killed. It wasn't even from me taking damage or anything. But, whatever. These things happen. He did get in one attack and did some decent damage. So, that's life. But anyways, point is that even if you were like, let's say these characters were level 6, suddenly something like a fighter, even if you wanted to do the same thing, you wanted to say, I'm going to go hand crossbow with crossbow expert and sharpshooter, but I'm going to be a fighter instead of a ranger. Level 6, you suddenly have that extra ability score increase, and suddenly now that kind of changes things up. Maybe you want to play a different race, and you can still now fit in both the feats. Maybe you decide I'm still going to be like, maybe custom lineage, and I'm going to take all three of the feats I mentioned. You take sharpshooter, you take crossbow exit, and you take piercer. There we go. I was thinking impale for some reason. And you take piercer, and suddenly now you can have that 18 deck still. You've got all three feats, and that kind of changes the dynamic up. Like, I feel like Ranger's generally a better choice than fighter at level 5, although action surge is great. So if you're getting multiple rests in a day, like 2 or 3 short rests, action surge really makes up a lot of ground. But like by level 6, that gap is starting to go in the fighter's direction, in my opinion. And then like at 11 plus, if you're like 11 levels of straight ranger versus 11 levels of straight fighter, I mean, action surge is just looking even better combined with the third attack around. Fighters are going to get another feat at 12, so will ranger, but then they're going to get another one at 14. So even going past 11, things start really swinging in the fighter's direction a lot more, in my opinion. Not that higher level spells aren't good too, but like ranger's not really getting the best of druid spells anyway, right? Like we all kind of know that's true. So if you're just planning on going straight class, I think that rangers really kind of peak around 5 or 6, to be honest. And then after that, I usually just multi-class into something different, like maybe fighter and grab action surge, for example. Always a good choice as well. Or assassin, or anything else that's going to use dexterity, is going to be pretty good. Or even wisdom, that can be a good choice too, right? Paladin at level 6 suddenly starts looking a lot better than at level 5. Level 5 is still pretty good. You've got your extra attack, you've got your second level spell slots, but level 6, you get that aura, and that can be a complete game changer. That's an insanely good ability, especially if you're in a very like front row heavy composition, where you've got like, in our case, you got a monk, you've got the paladin himself, you've got the Psy warrior fighter, we've got the rune knight fighter, and I mean, being the sorcerer, we're going to be at the back, but that's a lot of people that are going to be in range for that saving throw bonus in a lot of cases in that aura, And so, like I said, like that can be a big difference, right? Obviously things like spellcasting progression. I'm probably not going to, like, even as much as I love multi-classing, if I'm playing a pure caster in this type of scenario, I'm probably not going to multi-class because third level spells are just such a big jump in power, right? And, so even if I'm playing something like a warlock, I'd probably just play 5 levels of warlock if I know that we're only going to be playing like 5th level one-shots, right? Like I'm not going to be leveling up past that. So, I'd probably play wizard or sorcerer or something. Even cleric, I'm probably just going to take 5 levels of cleric because it's just such a big boost in power. But if you're playing, like, let's say your character's level 7, 8, 10, suddenly a lot of those other options start becoming a lot more valid. If you're playing at level 3, then suddenly you're like, you know what? Maybe I'm just going to take 1 level of Hexblade, 2 levels of Paladin. That's pretty good. Like, what's a level 3 Paladin going to have? They're going to get their Channel Divinity. I mean, that could be good, right? But in general, you're not going to be any worse off. You could be better off, honestly. So depending on what you want to do, the level that the story is set at can make a big difference in what character you want to play, what kind of multi-classing you might want to do with that character. None of our characters were multi-classed because at level 5, most of us just really felt like you're better off just taking 5 levels, whatever, getting your third level spells, getting extra attack. That kind of stuff is just really huge. So anyways, just figured I'd end things on that note. It was a really good time. Hopefully, like I said, they actually continue to do this kind of stuff. Our group had a ton of fun with it, and so did a lot of the other groups too. It was also neat to see some of the same people there, and even though like our table all knew each other and we're always like playing with each other the whole way through, right? But we also would see people that we knew from other sessions. We'd go talk to them and stuff, and during the break, you're actually allowed to exchange information. So you could tell other tables like, hey, we found out that he's vulnerable to this, but he's immune to this and resistant to that or whatever, right? And so you could exchange that kind of information around. And it just gave people a neat opportunity to talk with other people and socialize a bit. And it was just a really great time. So hopefully they continue to do it. Anyways, I figured I'd just talk about that and give a report on it and just say that we had a ton of fun. So anyways, thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment, and, ring the bell for notifications, of course. Most importantly, leave your comments in the comment section, and I'll see you next time. Bye.